Mikami is a professional loser until he was killed and reincarnated as a slime, where he became the most powerful SS-ranked monster. Mikami was on his way to meet his brother, but on his way, he recounts how he has achieved a lot in life, but he is still unable to get a woman of his own. He thinks of this after seeing his brother Tamura with a young lady who introduces herself as Solitary. Mikami begins to tease Solitary, but Tamura interrupts and tells them to talk while having lunch together. As they all begin to walk to the restaurant, a strange man with a knife suddenly sprints towards them. Just then, Mikami notices that the strange man is trying to stab Solitary. Immediately, he pushes her away and ends up getting stabbed instead while the man runs away. At this moment, Mikami falls down as he begins to bleed like butchered meat. However, while he wonders what is happening to him, he suddenly hears a voice telling him that he has acquired a new skill. On the other hand, Tamura runs to him and asks how he is doing, and he promises to take him to the hospital. Amidst this, Mikami lays on the floor shocked that he is bleeding so much while Tamura calls an ambulance, but Mikami asks himself if he would be reunited with his ancestors just like that. At that moment, he hears the strange voice in his head again, and it begins to reveal the different skills he has acquired. Furthermore, it also adds that it would generate a new body for him that would not require blood. Even after hearing this, Mikami ignores the voice and suddenly begins to notice that he is becoming cold. And again, the voice tells him that he has acquired a heat-resistant body. Hearing this, Mikami calls on Tamura and tells him to take the hard drive from his computer and wipe it off so that nobody would have access to it. Then the voice begins to take all of his thoughts and turns them into skills. Because of this, Mikami is able to acquire a predator skill, a sage skill, which develops into a unique skill of the Great Sage. Although he does not seem to understand everything the voice is talking about. Just then, Tamura tells him that he wanted to show Solitary off to him, but Mikami replies weakly and tells Tamura to take care of Solitary. Soon, Mikami tries to close his eyes to have some quiet time, but unfortunately dies in the process. Realizing that his brother is dead, Tamura becomes so sad. But on the other hand, Mikami realizes that he is dead, as he is unable to see anything since he is very much conscious about himself. Also, he realizes that he is unable to move his body, but is able to sense his environment as he notices some rocks. Also, he discovers that he is not in a hospital, as well as being able to live without using any of his body parts. Just then, he feels a leaf and realizes that the leaf has dissolved into his body. Seeing this, he continues to wonder what is wrong with him, as leaves do not dissolve in human bodies. His voice also changes, and he begins to wonder how Tamura and Solitary are doing. But he becomes more concerned as he is sure that he died, but does not understand the kind of creature he has become. He eventually discovers that he has been reincarnated as a slime. However, after accepting his new fate, Mikami hops to move, and while moving to nowhere in particular, he begins to get a hang of his new body, and he tries to console himself by embracing the good side of having a slimy body. He hops around and begins to ingest the plants he hops on. Just then, he assures himself about how useful his new body is, even though he is unable to sleep or eat. But suddenly, he begins to wonder and asks himself where all of the plants he is absorbing goes to. The system suddenly answers him, which startles him as he remembers it is the same voice he heard before dying. The voice tells him that all the plants he has ingested are stored in the stomach of one of his skills called the Predator skill. The system explains the skills he has and how he can be able to ingest some things using his body. Also, the system also adds that he can analyze any object, and when the analysis is complete, he would be able to mimic the object later. Immediately, he decides to analyze the plants he had ingested for a test, and the system tells him that the herbs he had ingested are healing herbs. Realizing this, he decides to ingest more for him to be able to make them into potions and store them in his body. After ingesting more herbs, Mikami comes across a gemstone, and when he asks the system what kind of stone it is, the system tells him that the gemstone is a magic ore which is very valuable. On hearing this, Mikami begins to ingest the gemstones in the cave until he hops and jumps into a lake. Finding himself in this situation, he begins to think of what to do as he notices that slimes do not float on water. Suddenly, an idea pops up in his head to ingest some of the water and use it to push himself out of the lake. As he does this, the system tells him that he has gained a water pressure propulsion skill. On getting out of the water, he hits his body hard on a wall and realizes that he does not feel any pain. The system tells him that it is because of his pain nullification skill, which makes him feel no pain no matter his body damage. Makami becomes surprised to hear this, and he also notices that he is able to repair any part of his body that is damaged. For him, this feature makes his new body more comfortable. Suddenly, he begins to hear another strange voice, asking him if he can hear them. Out of fear for what is going on, Makami tries to go away, but the voice tells him to stay. Going further, he tries to explain himself, but notices that the voice is unable to hear him. Angry at this, he yells at the voice and insults it, but it surprisingly hears him this time and informs him that he must have a death wish. Hearing this, he becomes more frightened, most especially since he had no idea that the voice could hear his thoughts. The voice suddenly bursts into laughter and tells him that he was trying to be nice since he had not received any visitors in a long time. Also, the voice promises Makami that he would give him sight, on the condition that he does not get scared when he sees the person talking and he must come back to talk to him again. Seeing that the conditions are not as hard as he had thought, he immediately agrees. The voice also adds that he has been sealed in the dungeon for 300 years and has been bored all the time because he had nothing to do. Then, Makami tells the voice that he accepts the conditions, even though he is curious to know why the voice was sealed in the dungeon. The voice tells him that he can use his magic sense skill to see very well. When Makami tries it, the system tells him that he has acquired a new skill, and he should accept it if he wants to use the magic sense skill. Immediately, Makami accepts and is able to see the herbs and the magic stones around him. He quickly goes near the water to check his reflection and realizes that he is really a slime. Just then, the voice calls his attention, and when he goes over to thank the person that helped him to see, he realizes that he had been talking to a huge and fierce-looking dragon all along. The dragon proceeds to introduce himself as Veldora, the storm dragon, and adds that he is one of the 4 true dragons that exists. However, just as Makami tries to leave, Veldora tells him to wait as he hopes that he has not forgotten their promise. The frightened Makami immediately tells him that he is not scared at all. Veldora asks him if he is a unique creature, as he has noticed that he has self-awareness, unlike the other slimes he knows of. Makami asks what the meaning of a unique is, and Veldora replies that it refers to a being with extraordinary abilities. Makami explains that he was once a human who got stabbed and died only for him to be reincarnated as a slime. Hearing this, Veldora tells him that he is not the only one that has gone through that, as they also have some people in his world who got summoned by the great sages of the world. These people, he says, are referred to as otherworlders. Because of this, Makami suddenly decides to go and find those people so as to know why he had reincarnated. Veldora becomes shocked as he asks if Makami is leaving so soon. But Makami becomes scared as he thinks Veldora will hurt him, as he lies that he is not going anywhere. Soon, Makami asks about how Veldora was sealed, and Veldora explains that he had been defeated by a hero summoned by the sages of the world. He had underestimated his opponent, which was the major cause of his defeat. Veldora then tells Makami that the hero sealed him using a life imprisonment skill. Upon hearing this, Makami comments that the way of his new world is sounding like that of video games.
We don't care.
Veldora explains the idea of surviving in the world, shortly, as the strong would always prevail. However, he ends his lecture by adding that he is so bored. This makes Makami wonder how lonely he had felt without having a girlfriend for 37 years, not to talk of someone who had been confined to a place for 300 years. After thinking for a while, Makami proposes that he becomes friends with Veldora, and Veldora shamelessly accepts. Then suddenly, Makami remembers that he told Tamura to wipe his computer, but becomes worried that Tamura might have taken a look at it. On the other hand, Makami is buried in his original world, and Tamura cries as he goes to Makami's house to stuff the whole computer system into a bathtub filled with water. Also, he remembers how nice Makami was to him and vows to name his child after his beloved senpai. Meanwhile, Makami asks Veldora what they are going to do about the life imprisonment the hero had placed him in. Then Veldora, who had been hopeless, tells him that he would be glad if he is freed from his imprisonment. He adds that he would not last another 100 years, because he is gradually losing his magicules, which make up his skills. Makami realizes that the magicules Veldora is losing is the reason why the dungeon is rich in healing herbs and expensive gemstones. He decides to ask his dragon friend what would happen to him if he loses all of his magicules, to which Veldora replies that he would just die, and it is not a big deal for him. Makami becomes sad and tries to use his predator skills to consume the imprisonment, but the system tells him that it has failed. Hearing this, He believes to find other means to release his friend and asks the system what they can do. Then the system tells him that they have to analyze the imprisonment from both sides of the wall, so as to get Veldora out of it. Unfortunately, Veldora says he would be unable to analyze the imprisonment as his skills are already sealed along with him. After thinking for a while, Mikami asks Veldora if he would like to get into his stomach. At this moment, the both of them give a kind of weird silence after the question. However, Mikami explains further that he would use his skills to analyze the wall, and Veldora would try to destroy the wall by using his fire breath. By doing this, Veldora would become quarantined in his stomach so that he would not disappear. Again, the weird and long silence fills the dungeon, and Veldora breaks the silence by letting out a loud laugh. He tells Mikami that he would be glad if he helps him out, as it is better for him to be in Mikami's stomach than to disappear in existence. As Mikami tries to start the process, Veldora tells him to hold on, that he wants to give Mikami a name to mark the beginning of their friendship, so that it would be like a family name for them. Hearing this, Mikami also begins to think of the name he would give Veldora, which would suit his personality. After many options, Mikami decides to give Veldora the name Tempest, which makes Veldora so excited, as he would now bear the name Veldora Tempest. Veldora also gives Mikami the name Rimuru, which he begins to bear from that moment. The two decide to make Tempest their last name as they engrave it into their soul. Then Rimuru proceeds to free Veldora from the imprisonment, but unknown to him, the people of the world immediately feel the awareness that Veldora the dragon has been freed from his imprisonment, even though they do not know where he had disappeared to. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Bloomend, one of the ministers goes to meet the guild master to ask what his guild is doing to make sure the release of the dragon does not open a way for monsters to lurk into the kingdom. On the other hand, Rimuru tries to find ways out of the dungeon, and after eating up magic herbs and ores, he gains more skills like the water blade skill, which is very sharp in attacking any enemy. Also, after the skills form a special skill called the water manipulation skill, Rimuru continues to find his way out of the dungeon until he suddenly gets confronted by a huge black serpent. Seeing this, he becomes scared and immediately tries to use the water blade skill, which chops off the serpent's head, surprising him that he took down the serpent with just one move. Then he proceeds to devour and analyze the serpent's remains to see if he would get its skills. After analyzing the serpent's body, Rimuru gets all of the serpent's abilities, including its poisonous breath, as well as a skill which can enable him to mimic the serpent by taking its shape and form. On seeing this, Rimuru becomes determined to defeat more monsters and get more skills. Shortly after, he encounters some dangerous monsters like a giant spider, the evil centipede, and a night bat, and as he defeats them, he gains all of their abilities. After defeating the bat, Rimuru uses the ultrasonic wave he had gotten from the bat to be able to talk. However, after several weeks of talking and wandering in the dungeon, Rimuru comes across a huge door that he thinks would be the exit out of the dungeon. Then, as he moves closer, he notices that the door begins to open and immediately goes into hiding. After the door opens completely, 3 adventurers, which consists of 2 men and a lady, enter the dungeon and begin to discuss how the dungeon looks deserted. At this moment, one of them uses his stealth ability to make all of them invisible while they continue their journey into the dungeon. Seeing them, Rimuru becomes surprised, as the adventurers are the first humans he would see since he reincarnated. But he becomes more confused when he realizes that he is able to understand them, which the system tells him is as a result of his unique magic sense. He also commends the man's ability, and tells himself that he would like to make friends with him later. Suddenly, he hops out of the dungeon, while the lady amongst the adventurers looks back as if she had heard something. Rimuru is able to see the sunlight again after leaving the dungeon, and for once, he remembers Veldora. Then he promises to have a fun life, so that he would be able to tell Veldora fun stories the next time they see. But at this moment, he gets confronted by a group of goblins, which makes him believe that his adventure has begun. The goblins suddenly become scared and refer to him as the strong one, but one of them calls out to him. Then Rimuru, who thought he was being nice, decides to yell out loud in order to introduce himself to the goblins. Surprisingly, the goblins fall down as they all bow to him. Then the leader of the group tells him that they need his help in their village, and they would be grateful if he can follow them, to which he agrees. On getting to the village elder explains that their god had gone missing, and since then, other monsters have been attacking their village and killing their villagers. Hearing this, Rimuru instantly concludes that Veldora is their missing god, and he tells himself that the timing fits perfectly. Then he tells them that he is just a slime who is not sure he would be able to save them like they had thought. Surprisingly, the elder replies that he should not act humble, as they have all seen the aura he is emitting from his body. Hearing this, Rimuru becomes confused as he does not understand what the elder meant. Then, he immediately asks the system to change the perspective of his magic sense so that he would be able to see himself. And when the system does that, he suddenly realizes that he has been emitting a huge amount of aura, which makes him conclude that it is the major reason the goblins are scared of him. Rimuru immediately sucks the aura in, causing the goblins to be surprised that he could have done that sense, but he keeps his cool and tells them that he had been testing them so as to see their level of confidence. Furthermore, the elder proceeds to tell him how some monsters have been disturbing and killing her men, and one of whom happens to be his first son. The goblins begin to beg Rimuru to help them in defeating the monsters, and after feeling sorry for them, he decides to help them since they promise him their loyalty if he successfully defeats the monsters disturbing them. Rimuru gathers all the men in the goblin village so as to help defeat the monsters called the dire wolves. But on seeing the men, he becomes disappointed as they look skinny, and he becomes skeptical of his decision to let them assist in defeating the monsters. He proceeds to ask the men if they are ready, and they reply that they are ready for a life or death situation. Yet, after hearing this, Rimuru is not so sure about their performance and advises them to be chill as he notices how tense they are. After addressing the men, Rimuru notices that he had spoken so cool and suddenly gets excited as he even blushes that he had sounded like a great inspiration to the goblins. Then he asks the men to take him where the injured goblins are. On getting there, he sees that most of the soldiers are badly injured, and he decides to try to heal them using the healing potions he had saved in his stomach. He tries it on the first goblin and sees that it works. Then he begins to heal the wounded soldiers, surprising the rest of the goblins. After this, Rimuru instructs the goblins to build a fence around the village so as to strengthen their defense. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the dire wolves are able to see that Veldora's protection is no longer visible on the goblins' village and decide to go and destroy the village so as to build a new foothold there. The wolves decide to attack the village, and when they get there, they see that the goblins are guarded by a little fence and a slime. Even with this, the leader of the pack tells the rest to attack, and when they do, they all get attacked by Rimuru's steel threads. Rimuru tells the wolves to go back, but they do not listen. Just then, the leader of the pack tries to attack the village and ends up getting stuck in Rimuru's sticky thread, who finishes the leader with his water blade skill. Then he proceeds to yell at the pack that their leader is dead and they should all go back without hurting the goblins. Surprisingly, this warning did not get to the wolves as they decided to turn deaf ears. Seeing this, Rimuru decides to analyze the dead wolf and mimic it to take its form. When he transforms into a wolf, he yells at the other wolves, but then again, they do not seem to be backing down, which causes him to begin to lose his cool. Suddenly, the wolves bow to Rimuru and vow to be loyal to him, surprising him. The following morning, Rimuru begins to wonder who would take care of the goblins and the wolves, as he would need to continue his adventure. Just then, he tells them that he would have them pair up and live together. Hearing this, the goblins and the wolves do not know what it means to pair up, and he explains to them. When he tries to pair them up, he realizes that they do not have names and decides to give all of them names. To do this, he begins to name them according to whatever he deemed for, but when he sees how excited they are, he just goes with the flow. After naming all of the goblins, he proceeds to name the wolves as well. But just as he is about to name the son of the pack leader he killed, he begins to wonder if the son is holding any grudges against him. But then, seeing how the wolves are wagging their tails, he concludes that they are not holding any grudges against him. After much thought, he names the son Ranga. Suddenly, he begins to feel weak and tired, to which the system tells him that his body is gradually shutting down into a sleep mode. This is so because he had used up most of his magicules, which would take him 3 days to recover. Rimuru becomes unable to talk or sense his surroundings, but he remains conscious. Looking at him, the goblin and wolves wonder what is wrong with him. However, after 3 days, he eventually regained his full recovery. There, when he opens his eyes, he sees a cute-looking female goblin in front of him. Seeing he has gained consciousness, the female goblin immediately goes to call the elder, while Rimuru begins to wonder if she had been in the village all along. Suddenly, a huge man enters and Rimuru recognizes him as Rigard, who was the village elder. Just then, Rimuru asks why his appearance has changed so much, to which he replies that the names he gave the goblins and the wolves had made them evolve into high-ranked monsters. Rimuru goes out to see that more goblins had evolved and even the wolves had become more huge than they were before, and this perfectly explains why his magicules drained out. The whole village begins to hail Rimuru for being their savior, and the system also informs him that the male and female goblins had evolved into hobgoblins and goblinas. Rimuru calls on Ranga, the second in command for the wolves, and asks him why the remaining wolves had revolved even though he was the only one he named. Ranga replies to this by telling him that the wolves are one, which makes them evolve through a shared name. He also adds that they are no more the dire wolves, but the Tempest wolves. Suddenly, Rimuru falls from a high place, but while he falls, he begins to think of how the goblins and wolves would live together and eat at the same time. Later, he holds another meeting with the monsters where he makes a lame joke. He decides to give the whole village some rules where he states that they must not attack humans or belittle other races. Also, there should be no fight amongst them. Just then, when they ask him why he had told them to go by the rules, he explains that they need to be careful in their dealings so as not to provoke the humans to attack them. Hearing this, the whole village seems to understand. Then he proceeds to make Rigurd the Lord of Goblins, so as to avoid the responsibility for himself. He also assigns some of the villagers to look after the village, as well as choose a team to take care of the feeding. But then he discovers that the team he put in charge of their shelter is not doing a great job as their buildings are collapsing. Rimuru also complains about their revealing clothes, which although makes him feel better, but he tells them that they have to get better ones. Rigurd immediately suggests that they get clothing items from other merchants who are dwarves. Hearing this, Rimuru gets so excited and decides to go get some items. Rigurd also adds that they might get people who would construct good houses for the goblins as well. Shortly after, he puts Rigurd in charge of the goblins and sets out for the dwarf city, which is said to be a huge city, alongside 4 other goblins while riding on the wolves. On the way, Rimuru becomes very excited that he would get to meet with real dwarfs. They all rode the wolves and soon realized that the wolves were going faster. When Rimuru informs Ranga about this and instructs him to slow down, Ranga increases his speed instead. Soon, they all decide to rest for a while and Rimuru decides to ask Rigurd, who named his elder brother. To this, Rigurd answers that it was an officer in the Demon Lord's army that named his elder brother. On hearing this, Rimuru becomes scared and promises himself not to meet with the Demon Lord nor the hero Veldora had mentioned to him. After a while, Rimuru also meets Ranga and asks him why he does not wish to have his revenge on him for killing his father. To his surprise, Ranga tells him he does not feel that way toward him because he had spared their lives after defeating them. Shortly after, they continue their journey again, and when night falls, they all camp to eat meat. While they eat, Rimuru asks Gobta, who is meant to be their guide, what the city of the dwarf is like. Gobta explains that the city houses elves and some other monsters, and it is headed by a king who has no tolerance for fighting as he had declared the city a neutral and free city for all. Rimuru becomes fascinated at the mention of elves and begins to think that the city must be a beautiful place. Just then, Rigurd adds that the mighty army of the city has not been defeated in 1,000 years. Hearing this too, Rimuru believes that no one would want to get on the bad side of the king. The following morning, they set out again and soon got to the gates of the great Dwarven city, which only took them 3 days due to the speed from Ranga and his brothers. On getting there, Rimuru decides to go in alone with Gobta, and when Rigurd expresses his displeasure, Rimuru explains that they would not stay long before coming back. As they take their leave, Rimuru begins to think of the beautiful elves he would see, but suddenly snaps back on their main mission. Getting close to the gate, they see a long line, and Gobta explains that they would be searched before they are allowed into the city. However, while they wait, some stupid adventurers suddenly try to pick on them before entering. The adventurers suddenly try to attack them, but Rimuru tells Gobta to stand back while he solves the problem. Facing the bad guys, Rimuru tries to tell the adventurers to leave them alone. But this does not help as the adventurers become more interested in them because they realize that a talking slime would get them more money. Knowing the situation, Rimuru immediately moves towards them and transforms into a wolf. Seeing this, the adventurers begin to use their skills by trying to bring him down, but all of their efforts are in vain. Then Rimuru suddenly yells at them using one of the wolf's skills called the Essence skill. Surprisingly, the yell causes a lot of people to faint, while some run away after soiling their body. The moment Rimuru transforms back into a slime, one of the army suddenly calls him and Gobta and takes them into the city where they are locked up. When one of the soldiers asks what had happened, Rimuru gives a detailed account of the story, and the soldier confirms it correlates with what one of the witnesses said. Suddenly, another soldier comes in to tell the soldier that they are being confronted by a monster, and the monster has injured some of their colleagues. The soldier immediately asks if the wounded soldiers are already treated, but the soldier replies that they are out of healing potions. On hearing this, Rimuru decides to give them some of his potions which he had stored in his stomach. Then, after giving the potions to the soldier, he warns Rimuru not to leave his cell as he would be calm to settle their case. Later that night, while Rimuru plays with his webs just to pass time, suddenly the soldiers arrive and begin to thank him for the potions he gave them. Thankfully, they freed Rimuru. However, after holding a converse with the commander of the soldiers, he immediately chips in his quest for blacksmiths, and the commander immediately offers to take him to one of the blacksmiths. While going through the city, Rimuru looks at how civilized the city is, until the commander suddenly tells him to keep up so that he would not get lost. They arrive at the blacksmith shop where Rimuru is so surprised to see different kinds of weapons. Then the commander introduces the blacksmith as his elder brother Keijin. Keijin gets the feedback from the soldiers that Rimuru had saved them, and he thanks Rimuru. Then, unfortunately, he tells them that he has to work hard as he is supposed to deliver some weapons to the king in 5 days. Also, he adds that he does not have the item, which is a magic ode to create the weapons. At this moment, Rimuru remembers that he had ingested some ores and immediately gives it to Keijin, who becomes surprised. Keijin asks him what he wants in return, and finally, after a long minute of silence, Rimuru tells him to call on other blacksmiths to come and teach the goblins their crafts and also build houses for them. He also adds that they need some clothing items as well. After hearing these wants, Keijin immediately accepts. The men decide to help Keijin in making the swords, but Rimuru gets an idea and asks for a sample of the sword Keijin wants to make. When they show him the shiny king's sword, he immediately ingests it and analyzes it, making the men surprised at what he is trying to do. After analyzing the sword, Rimuru surprisingly makes 20 copies of the sword using the magic ore and with the help of the system. The men become shocked and excited at the skills Rimuru possesses. After delivering the swords to the king, Keijin and the other soldiers decide to go to a place called the Beautiful Nights to have some fun. And when they ask Rimuru if he would like to go, he refuses politely. Just then, Keijin mentions that there are elves in the place, which makes him excited, but he decides to act tough a little before agreeing to go. On getting to the bar, the beautiful elves there welcome the men, and Rimuru begins to feel like he is in heaven as the elves place him close to their chests. The elves are excited because Rimuru is squishy, but unknown to them, Rimuru also feels the same way. Keijin, seeing that Rimuru is having fun despite not wanting to follow them, begins to laugh at him. Seeing Keijin do this, Rimuru is unable to defend himself as he begins to get shy. Just then, the elves urges them to have some drinks. While the men drink with the elves, Rimuru recounts the story of how he made copies of the awesome longsword Keijin made. Keijin also confesses that he was a bit angry, but Rimuru has motivated him to make a sword that cannot be copied. Suddenly, at this moment, Rimuru remembers Gobda and realizes he is still in prison. Suddenly, a lady calls on Rimuru and asks if she can help him predict his future. Then she proceeds to ask what he would like to know, but the men decide that they check the lady he would end up with. Upon checking, they all see a young damsel in distress, whom Rimuru sees, and his VJ self begins to wonder when he would get to meet her. Suddenly, a minister of the king, Vesta, enters the bar and tries to pick on Keijin by asking him what he is doing there, as he has to deliver the swords to the king. But then, Keijin tells him he has delivered the swords, surprising the man. However, Vesta comments on the fact that they had brought Rimuru, an ordinary monster, into the bar and goes ahead to pour wine on Rimuru. Rimuru gets angry at this, but decides not to overreact so as not to put Keijin in trouble since Vesta is a minister. But to everyone's surprise, Keijin suddenly punches Vesta hard in his face and beats him up for disrespecting his friend Rimuru. After beating Vesta into a pulp, Keijin then tells Rimuru that he would be sure to follow him back to the goblins' village in order to help him. But unfortunately, their victory becomes short-lived as the soldiers come to arrest them all. After being put in prison pending their trial, Rimuru notices that Gobda is sleeping. Then Keijin apologizes to him and his brothers for putting them into trouble. He also begins to tell the story of why Vesta is being mean to him, as he explains that he was once the captain of one of the 7 orders of the Royal Knights. He further explains that Vesta had been his junior who messed up with a project that eventually went up in flames and blamed him for it. However, after presenting false witnesses against him, he had no choice but to quit. Cajun also adds that Vesta is a hardworking man, but if he leaves the country for him, Vesta would be able to focus on his business, which is why he decides to follow Rimuru. Hearing this, his brothers also vows to follow him, and when they ask Rimuru for permission, he accepts and they all laugh through the night. At midnight, while Rimuru wonders if he would leave Gobta behind, suddenly, Gobta wakes up and begins to wonder how he got tied, but Rimuru uses his webs to keep him shut while he rests for the trial the next day. The following day, the king of the dwarfs, Gazel, appears before them. At this time, Vesta pays the person that is meant to talk on their behalf. Seeing their king, they all bow before the king, and when the verdict is given, Cajun is given 20 years of hard labor, while his brothers are given 10 years. Meanwhile, Rimuru begins to think that something is fishy as Vesta looks more injured than he was. The king proceeds to talk and asks Cajun if he would love to join his army again, but Cajun tells him that Rimuru is his new master, and he has made a promise to follow him. Angry at Cajun's answer, the king immediately gives a final judgment that Cajun and his brother be exiled, but Rimuru notices that the king is sad as Cajun is about to leave. At the end of the trial, the king announced to Vesta that he would be relieved of his duties because he had been lying to him all this while. He adds that Vesta has made the whole city lose their friendship with Rimuru, who had given them a highly effective healing potion. Realizing he is done for, Vesta begins to cry as he explains how he had always wanted to serve the king, as well as admits to the fact that he had always envied Cajun. Despite his explanations, the king tells him to never show himself before him again. And before the king leaves, he thanks Vesta for his services while Vesta continues to sob uncontrollably. However, the soldiers escort Cajun and the rest of the gates, and after bidding each other farewell, the soldiers close the gates and Rimuru leads the way to the forest where the remaining goblins and wolves are. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the king sends someone to go and observe Rimuru's movements as he is a true beast like the storm dragon Veldora. At Bloomend, the 3 adventurers Rimuru had found at the entrance of the cave go to report to the guildmaster, Faze, and the adventurers confirm Veldora's disappearance. They add that the whole dungeon was cleared out as they did not come across any monster. Hearing this, Faze immediately gives them 3 days of rest and explains that after resting, they would go into the forest to keep searching for monsters that are likely to enter their kingdom, and they take their leaves. Outside, one of the male named Cable and the female named Gren begin to complain, but the other male named Dido tells them that they should have thrown tantrums at the guildmaster. While the 3 talk, a strange lady with a mask on her face suddenly comes over and asks them if she can accompany them to the great forest of Jura, as she had overheard them talking about it. Gren immediately accepts that she can follow them, but Cable becomes angry and tells her that he is the leader, but he accepts as well. Gren introduces the group to the strange lady, and she also introduces herself as Shizu. Meanwhile, Rimuru returns to the goblins' village and sees that more goblins had joined them because they were threatened by other monsters since Veldora had disappeared. Rimuru, however, goes ahead to name all of them and then sleeps off for 3 days again. Soon, Cajun and his brothers begin to teach the goblins their works. Cajun teaches them how to make weapons, and his other brothers teaches them how to make clothes, amours, and most especially building. Seeing how dedicated they are, Rimuru becomes so proud of them that he goes ahead to show Ranga his new skill. When he shows Ranga this new skill of his, he realizes that the skill is too powerful, and he would have to find the kind of enemy he uses it on. Also, Rimuru sees that Gobta is as well able to teach the new goblins how to summon their wolf as he had mistakenly found out his skill when he was tied up by Rimuru in the prison. It was because of the wolf he summoned that made it possible for him to get out of the prison to join the other goblins in the forest. Suddenly, Rikard, who has evolved into the Goblin King, suddenly runs to Rimuru and tells him Rikard reports that some humans are headed for their village. On the other hand, Shizu and the weird party she had joined are suddenly being chased by some giant ant monsters that were provoked by their dumb leader, Cable. After grinning for a while, Shizu suddenly stops to defeat the ants with her awesome sword and skills while the others watch in awe. To everyone's surprise, when she defeats all the ants, the adventurers get so shocked. Just then, while Shizu is not looking, one of the ants tries to attack her, and when she tries to defeat it, she suddenly becomes weak and falls down, but she luckily gets saved by a black lightning. The others begin to wonder what had happened, but when Gren goes to meet her, her mask falls off and Rimuru suddenly comes out of the dust. Seeing him, they all become shocked that he is a talking slime. Rimuru takes the mask and asks if they have a problem with the talking slime, and when they tell him that it is not like that, he takes the mask and tries to hand it over to Shizu. Just at this moment, he realizes that she is the same girl he had seen, whom he is destined to be with. However, Rimuru invites the adventurers to the midst of his new family, and they are given a place to stay and food. Later, Rimuru goes to check on them, and they all introduce themselves to him, while they also thank him for giving them food and a place to stay. Rimuru begins to check out his future wife and also checks out the qualities she has, but he becomes more curious as he wonders if she is Japanese. Later that evening, Shizu stands to watch the sunset, and when Rimuru goes to meet her, she carries him on her chest, making him recount that he is enjoying the perks of being a slime. She asks for Rimuru's story, and he tells her that he had reincarnated, while she tells him that she was summoned. Immediately, Rimuru remembers that Veldora had told him how heroes are summoned and made weapons. He also remembers that Veldora had added that the summoners also put a curse on the summons so that they would not defy them. Shizu talks about how her village was ruined and her mother died. Seeing how sad she is at this moment, Rimuru uses his magic sense to share his memories with Shizu. When he does this, Shizu becomes happy at the sight of the city she is seeing. Then Rimuru adds that he wants to make the world as peaceful as his original world. But all of a sudden, Shizu drops him as she feels a huge pain in her body. Just then, Kajin comes to call Rimuru to ask him where to build new houses. And while they take their leaves, Kajin teases Rimuru by asking him if he had interrupted something. While the men leave, Shizu remembers how she was summoned to the world and her body was given to a fire monster. Shizu also remembered how she was tested by her summoner, by defeating a classless parrot-like monster without gaining control over her own body. She also recollects how her summoner had become proud of her, and when he asks her of her name and she tells him, he proceeds to change it from Shizu to Shizu. Furthermore, she recollects how she had unintentionally killed her friend and their pet, whom she named Pizu, just because they were like a threat to her summoner, and even the souls from heaven can tell that there is something wrong with that. Shizu suddenly wakes up from her deep sleep and realizes that she had been sleeping all along. Looking beside her, she realizes that Gren had been sleeping beside her all along. Again, she suddenly feels weird as she groans in pain, but gets over it and steps outside. On seeing her, Rimuru goes to meet Shizu and asks her if she is enjoying the village, as she is also welcome to stay with them. But unfortunately, Shizu declines the offer politely and tells them that she has to leave and bids Ranga goodbye. She goes back to the room and sees Gren, who also invites her to join them on their journey back to Blumund. She tells her that she is happy to have her last journey with them, but she would only cause more trouble if she stays with them. Later, the men wait for the ladies outside, and when they finish, Faze asks why it takes longer for ladies to get ready than men. Suddenly, Shizu stops midway and begins to act strange while Gren calls out to her. Soon, she begins to groan in pain and gets on her knees. At this moment, to everyone's surprise, a huge ray of light shines from her eyes, and it also breaks her mask. Seeing this strange occurrence, the others begin to wonder what is wrong with Shizu. But they all suddenly see a huge flame gather round her, and Faze recognizes her as the hero of the world, which was said to have appeared back after 50 years. Rimuru begins to wonder what the adventurers are talking about, but he immediately tells Rigard to evacuate the village as they do not know what danger Shizu would cause them. Suddenly, Shizu's mask falls off and Rimuru realizes that they are in for war as Shizu suddenly transforms into the flame demon Ifrit. Rimuru tells Ranga to stay hidden till he needs him, only for him to get more surprised as he sees that the other three adventurers have refused to run for their lives as they are all determined to save Shizu at all cost. Soon, Ifrit begins to attack Rimuru and the adventurers using his flames. During this attack, Rimuru asks him what he wants but refuses to reply and attacks Rimuru instead. Then, Ifrit creates some fire salamanders which immediately puts fire on the village. Seeing the village on fire, Rimuru becomes so pained as they had just built some part in the village. However, the adventurers build a magic circle around them, and Rimuru instructs Ranga to avoid attacks from the salamanders while he focuses on attacking them. Rimuru proceeds to try his water skill, but the skill evaporates before touching the monsters. Realizing something is wrong, he asks the system why his attacks are not having any effect on the monsters, and the system tells him that only magic attacks are strong enough to fight the monsters. After that, he decides to use his water skills once again, but the system tells him that the impact of his attack would affect a large space in the world. For a while, he thinks of what to do until he sees Gren shooting magical arrows at the monsters. Seeing this, he tells her to shoot the arrow at him, and when she does, he analyzes it and makes more copies, which he shoots at 2 of the salamanders. The third salamander attacks the 3 adventurers, and when Rimuru notices that the salamander intentionally blows up itself so as to hurt them, he immediately instructs Reinga to take them somewhere safe while he deals with Ifrit. Ifrit sees Rimuru and immediately makes clones of himself around him. When Rimuru sees this, he uses the remaining magic arrows of the clones while leaving the original Ifrit. Suddenly, Rimuru sees that he is trapped in a magic circle, and Ifrit uses his flames magic to create a whirlwind of flames around Rimuru. Due to this, Rimuru is sad that his life is going to end for the second time, but unknown to him, Reinga and the other villagers are watching him from afar. While Rimuru continues to whine that he would die again, he decides to relax and asks the system how long it would take before his body goes up in flames, and the system tells him that he has thermal heat ability. Hearing that he can resist flames, Rimuru becomes very excited as he is assured that he would not die, and defeating Ifrit would also be a piece of cake for him. However, Ifrit turns his back to go, but the now excited Rimuru uses his strong web string to tie his body while he proudly comes out of the flames and tells Ifrit how they had both underestimated each other's ability. Ifrit tries to rain flames on Rimuru, but it is to no avail. Then, Rimuru uses his greatest skill of the predator to ingest Ifrit, and after doing that, he becomes excited as sees Shizu, who had fallen down unconscious. Meanwhile, Ifrit sees himself in a dark place, and when he tries using his powers to get out, it seems impossible. Suddenly, he hears a familiar voice telling him that he would not be able to escape as he is no match for Rimuru. The voice continues and introduces himself as Veldora Tempest, Rimuru's sworn friend. Shortly after, Shizu wakes up and thanks Rimuru, who is sitting by her side for saving her from killing the friends she cared about. Then she asks Rimuru if he would like to listen to her stories, to which he agrees. She begins to explain how she had been possessed by Ifrit after she was summoned, and how she served the Demon Lord as his right-hand aide. She also adds that after there was trouble and the Demon Lord had to leave his castle, he made her the rear guard of the castle until she met the hero. She proceeds to say that she tried to fight with the hero, but she was unable to defeat her. However, when the hero spoke to her by asking her what she was doing in the castle, she told her story and began to cry. She tells Rimuru that the hero believed her story and taught her some things, as well as give her her mask in order to surprise Ifrit's powers. She tells Rimuru that the hero taught her to take some of Ifrit's skills, which had given her the name the Conqueror of Flames. Furthermore, she adds that on a fateful day, the hero tells her that she is certain they would meet again and suddenly disappears without looking back. However, Shizu tells Rimuru that she did not know why, but she vowed to help people in need, which is why she helps people, as it is also a means for her to get stronger. After all the talks, she asks Rimuru if everything she said sounded impressive, and he tells her that it did. Shizu continues her story by telling Rimuru that she became a hero to many people, but the older she got, the harder it became to control Ifrit, and so as not to hurt more people she cared about, she decided to become an instructor at a school. On hearing this, Rimuru becomes surprised that there are schools in his new world just like his former world. However, Shizu tells him that the school was located in a place called the Kingdom of the Gracia, and the students make her happy by teaching her the things she knows, like video games. In addition, she tells Rimuru that a few years later, they all left, while one of them became a grandmaster who is to look after guilds all over the country. After saying all of these, she tells Rimuru that she cannot remember anything else, but all she remembers is that she started looking for the man who had summoned her into the world, so as to ask him some things. Rimuru asks if she wants revenge, but she tells him that she is not sure. Then, she goes ahead and asks for a favor from Rimuru, to which he asks what it is. Then surprisingly, she tells him that she would love him to ingest her body just like he had done to Ifrit, as she does not like the world she is in. But also on the other hand, Shizu does not want it to absorb her, even though she knows her time to live is not long anymore. After thinking about it, Rimuru eventually accepts her request, which makes her very happy, but begins to shed some tears afterwards. Shortly after, Shizu asks Rimuru for his real name, and when he tells her, she also tells him that her real name is Shizu Aizawa. Hearing this, Rimuru asks for the name of the man she was looking for, and she reveals that his name is Leon Cromwell, who is one of the most powerful demon lords. Then, Rimuru asks her what she wants to ask him in particular, to which she tells him that she just wants him to acknowledge her existence as a human being. Nicely, Rimuru promises to do as she wishes. At this time, Shizu becomes very weak all of a sudden and her hair turns white, and unfortunately ends up dying. Upon realizing the situation, Rimuru immediately ingests her and hopes that she rests peacefully in his stomach, while having nice dreams which she would not come out from. Meanwhile, FaZe and his party walk towards the tent where Shizu is, and Granite asks the rest if they think Shizu would be okay, and FaZe replies that Rimuru's potions are good enough to make her better. All of a sudden, they see Rigard, who is taking some change of clothes to Shizu. However, when Rigard gets back in, he suddenly sees a young boy with blue hair, who is stark naked. Immediately, Rigard calls out to Rimuru, while the boy turns back crying. Getting there, Rimuru explains all that happened and apologizes for not consulting them before ingesting Shizu. But instead, to his surprise, they tell him that it is okay as it was her last wish. FaZe then asks Rimuru if he is really the slime, causing him to transform back to his original self and tell them all the nice things Shizu had said about them. Suddenly, the adventurers tell Rimuru that they are leaving in order to report their adventures to their guildmaster. They promise to speak well about him and Shizu, but before they go, they beg Rimuru to go back to his human form as he looks like young Shizu. He honors their requests, and when he does, they thank him as Shizu and say parting words. Noticing their sad faces, Rimuru begins to crack a joke that ends with them starting to argue like they used to. When the adventurers bid the villagers farewell, Rimuru tells them to wait while he gives them a new set of gears for their adventures, making them get excited. At this moment, Rimuru calls out to Keijin and his brothers as they had crafted the gears themselves. On seeing them, the adventurers become starstruck and recognize them as the famous blacksmiths who are well known for their good works. After the adventurers leave, Rimuru decides to make the demon lord, Leon Cromwell, pay for making Shizu's life hell, but then he decides to gather some information about him first. Meanwhile, in another part of the country, a monster who is tired of walking is sighted by another monster who tells him that he would give him a name and some food. Surprised at the kind gesture, the weak monster asks who the other monster is, to which he replies that his name is Gelmund, but he can refer to him as his father. Gelmund names the monster Deld and tells him that he would one day take possession of the great forest of Jura and become the orc disaster. After this, Gelmund gives Geld meat to eat while he watches as he devours it hungrily. On the other hand, the goblins and the dwarves are doing well, as Keijin and his brother make more clothing and building materials. Seeing how hardworking they are, Rimuru is happy that he does not have to instruct them before they know what to do. Later, Rimuru goes inside the room, and after checking if nobody is around, he visits Shizu's mask and makes a promise to keep it in remembrance of her great life. He also transforms into his human body and evaluates his vision and hearing, but he concludes that he can see and hear better as a slime. Then he asks the system if he can use body doubles just like Ifrit did, and the system replies that he can now use the power as he had analyzed the skill when he ingested the fire demon. Immediately, he creates a body double of himself and realizes that his human form looks like Shizu. He also decides to check his gender in his human form, and after being excited of what gender he might turn out to be, he gets disappointed when he sees that he has no gender, although he thinks it is because of his non-specific gender slime body. Also, he learns that he can make an older version of himself, and he does. He commends his male form for being handsome and his female form for being beautiful. Soon after this, Rigard comes to give Rimuru his report and asks if he would not eat with them as usual. But just as Rimuru is about to decline the offer, he immediately remembers that he is in a human form, which means he can now taste good food. Seeing his excitement, Rigard tells him they would make a lavish feast for him after that night. Later, Rimuru goes to see the hunting party, and when he announces to them that he would eat with them, they promise to bring good meat. Just then, Gapta tells Rimuru that he wonders if his chest would grow bigger if he begins to eat. Hearing this, Rimuru gets angry and kicks the stupid one out of his sight, while the rest plead on his behalf. However, Rimuru calls in Ranga to follow the hunting party while he goes to the cave to test out some new powers he got from Shizu. On getting to the cave, he acquires a new skill called Black Flames and tells himself that he would be careful on when to use it. He also decides to wear Shizu's mask, knowing that it suppresses magical powers. After wearing the mask, the system informs him that his aura has been erased, and he looks like a normal person. Then he decides to wear it to new places. While checking himself out, he suddenly receives a thought communication from Ranga, and the system tells him that from Ranga's voice, there seems to be trouble. Immediately, Rimuru goes out to look for them, and when he sees them, he realizes they are being attacked. At this moment, he sees that Gapta is injured, and after healing him, he looks around and sees some strange people fighting the goblins. He calls Ranga and Rigurd to retreat, while he decides to talk to the people attacking his men. He asks them if they would like to talk about what is going on, but they do not answer him. Because of their rudeness, Rimuru tells Ranga to keep their magician busy while he deals with the rest of them. Just then, he realizes that they are ogres. He tells Ranga that he would be fine. As he goes up against them, the head of the ogres yells at Rimuru, claiming that he is a magician working with the evil pigs. Hearing this, he becomes confused as he does not understand what the ogre is saying. At that moment, the oldest of the ogre suddenly begins to name all the skills Rimuru used in defeating the other members, which surprises him. Although, with how surprised Rimuru is, he decides not to show more of his skills as he does not want to give himself out. The leader of the pack begins to attack Rimuru, ignoring the fact that he had told him that they can settle it. During the attacks, the oldest ogre cuts off one of Rimuru's arms, but he immediately regenerates a new arm. Because of this, Rimuru gets angry and decides to show them his true self. He starts by taking off his mask, and they can all see the huge aura he is emitting. Then, he suddenly uses his new skill, the Black Flame, on them. Seeing this, the magician realizes how powerful Rimuru is, but unknown to them, he is also scared as he is only bluffing because he does not want to fight them. Despite witnessing Rimuru's power, the leader of the ogres tells the eldest that he would not leave, but the magician goes to meet him as her brother to talk to him. However, after she tells him that Rimuru might not be their enemy, he ends up calming down. Rimuru explains that he and his men are just from a small village nearby and invites them to their feasts, which they accept. To conclude everything, they all undo the magic they used on each other's army. On their way to the village, Rimuru asks if the ogres have names, to which the leader responds that they do not. After arriving in the village during the feast, Rimuru eventually tastes food for the first time in his human form, and he finds it very delicious, causing him to be happy. Later, the head of the ogres tells some of the goblins that the orcs attacked them, but they believe it is impossible, considering the ogre's strength. To clear their doubt, the leader decides to tell them the story about how it all happened. He begins by telling them that his village was attacked out of nowhere by those that carried strong weapons and armor. Furthermore, he tells them about how massive their numbers were and how they filled up the entire village while being led by a masked magician. At that moment, informs them that the reason he attacked Rimuru was because he thought that he was the masked magician that attacked their village. After hearing this story, they all begin to worry that the orcs have sided with one of the demon lords, which they wonder why. At this moment, Rimuru arrives and asks the leader of the orcs what they plan to do in the future. The leader tells him that he plans to rebuild and attack the orcs back. After he said this, Rimuru looks at him for a while and realizes that he does not have a plan or knows where to find the orcs. Then he suggests that they stay with him so that he can provide food and shelter for them. To ease their minds, he lets them know that with regards to the issue of the orcs attacking them, it is obvious that it is a demon lord that is pulling the strings and he would not want them to be attacked again. However, the leader of the ogres asks for some time to think about all that Rimuru has said. Suddenly, Rimuru stands up and tells him that he has all the time he wants to think about it. Then he takes his leave. The following morning, the leader goes to see Rimuru to accept the offer presented to him and also asks if the contract ends as soon as they successfully defeat the orcs. Rimuru tells him that he can do whatever he wants after the defeat, or they can agree to stay and build a nation with them. After this, the leader stands up to leave and Rimuru asks him to go call the others. Shortly after, with the other ogres present, Rimuru informs them that he will be giving them names. Meanwhile, they feel uncomfortable, stating the risks involved in getting names, but their leader tells Rimuru that they will accept the names given to them. Rimuru comes down from his bed and begins to name the ogres, until all of a sudden he passes out. Later on, he wakes up in the tender heart bags of one of the ogres and realizes that he passed out the moment he gave the ogre's leader a name. He also notices that he has reduced in size, and at this moment, he gets the information that he is now a Kijin. Looking around, he realizes that he has also named the rest of the ogres, which had taken a huge amount of his magicals and made him pass out. Upon realizing this, he he proceeds to tell his system that it should have informed him earlier about what the naming would do to him. At that moment, he wonders where the sixth person is. Suddenly, the idiot walks in and sees that Rimuru has now woken up. Upon seeing how beautifully they have all transformed, Rimuru asks them if they will be great friends. Meanwhile, at the lizard territory, they are given news that the orcs are advancing towards their territory with over 200,000 men. On hearing this information, they begin to wonder how the orc has twice the number of their soldiers and begin to worry about everything. They also remind their ruler of how they took out the ogre village, but the chieftain says that it is only an orc lord that can command such an army, causing them to become more worried. At this moment as well, they begin to wonder if they can defeat the orc, but the chieftain tells them that they will need backup because fighting them alone is impossible. To get this done, he summons his son and tells him that there is something he wants him to do. Back at the goblins' village, Rimuru asks the leader of the ogres if he has any reason why the orcs want to attack them, and the leader informs him that a Majin wanted to name him, but he looked untrustworthy, so he had rejected the offer. This left the Majin angry and led it to curse him before he left. Furthermore, he tells Rimuru his name, and the dummy realizes that he has heard the name before. Shortly after, he receives a report about the lizard men, who have come to make negotiations with the goblin village. Hearing this, Rimuru begins to wonder what they are looking for and decides to go see them. Meanwhile, the son of the Lizard King receives praises from his followers about being the new chieftain. He states that his father is too old to continue being the chieftain, therefore, he promises to be a good ruler to them all. Then, he tells them all to follow him, saying that he will defeat the orcs and become the new chieftain. This makes them begin to hail him as they follow him. Rimuru goes to see how the princess is doing and how the cloth making is coming about. There she tells him that the machine made for her is working very well and she will go ahead in making clothes for them all to wear. At this moment, Shine, who has volunteered to be Rimuru's secretary and bodyguard, tells him that his lunch will get cold. Seeing her, the princess asks if her work is going well, and she replies that it is. Shortly afterwards, the two ladies begin to fight over who will take care of Rimuru. To create peace, Rimuru tells the princess that she needs to sew the silk, and she can as well help him out in her spare time. Immediately after saying this, he begins to even wonder what he is asking for. Suddenly, Shine grabs him and walks away so that he can have his food. On entering the building, he sees the others and asks them if they would like to join him. But surprisingly, they all act strange and turn down his offer, making him wonder what is wrong. However, Shine immediately goes out to get the food while Rimuru goes back to his human form and begins to wonder what is happening. Shortly after, Shine returns with a weird substance in the bowl, which makes Rimuru realize that everyone turned her down because they knew she cannot cook. He tries to eat it, but suddenly sees that it has an eye and a mouth. Having scooped a spoon, he accidentally places it inside one of the goblin's mouths, and the goblin immediately begins to act strange. Watching this, he immediately sees that Gapta has been sent to the depth of Hades. Realizing this, he tells Shan that before she cooks again, she must seek permission from Benimaru. Meanwhile, the lizardmen continue in their mission to gather forces from nearby villages. Then, they realize that Rimuru's village is next and begin to wonder how goblins and dire wolves will be together in the same village. Gabiru then decides to go talk to Rimuru, who is busy discussing with Rigard about technical issues. Suddenly at the village, Rimuru is called upon and told that the convoy of lizardmen has arrived, making him wonder if they are dealing with a friend or a foe. Noticing their dramatic entry, he begins to wonder what they are up to. Then he listens to Gabiru brag about protecting them and calling them weaklings, knowing that they cannot protect themselves from the orcs. Hearing him, Gabiru asks for the person that tamed the dire wolf. Rimuru tells them he did not tame them, but they became allies. He also summoned Ranga, whom they all become afraid of after seeing him and wonders if that is his true sides to help them out. Gabiru tells Ranga that he has been deceived, therefore he would fight Rimuru for deceiving Ranga. Suddenly, Gapta, who is known to be dead, arrives in their midst. Seeing him, everyone realizes he now has the poison resistance skill. Suddenly, Ranga picks him up to fight with Gabiru, the lizardmen leader. Confused, Gapta wonders what is going on, but Rimuru tells him that if he loses, he will eat the poisoned food again. Immediately, he begins to fight Gabiru and gives him a very deadly punch, making him scream at the top of his voice. During the fight, Rimuru sees that Gapta is using shadow movement, but he is finding it hard to believe what he is seeing. At the end of the fight, They declare Gobta the winner and immediately begin to celebrate with him. On the other hand, Rimuru informs the lizard men that he will help them with the orcs. Immediately, the lizard men take Gabiru and hurry away, stating that the fight is not over. Meanwhile, the orcs continue to march towards the north, and when the report is brought to Rimuru, they start to look for a possible way to stop them. Suddenly, Rimuru is informed that one of the scouts has made contact with a dryad, and his presence is requested, and he immediately demands for her to be brought to him. On getting to Rimuru, the lady tells him that she has a request, making him begin to wonder what sort of request. Suddenly, she tells him that her request is for him to defeat the Orc Lord. She proceeds to tell them that the Orc Lord exists. Surprised, Rimuru tells her that they thought it was still a theory, but she says she has knowledge of what is happening in the forest. She tells him that she has come to join an alliance with him to fight the Orc's Lord, surprising everyone. Hearing this, Rimuru thinks for a while and tells her that he will need time to process everything. He tells her that he is the leader, but then he also needs to speak with the others before making a decision. They continue the conference, and Rimuru realizes that the orc's motive is to kill and take the powers of those it kills by feeding on a corpse. Thinking about it, Rimuru finds this very disturbing and immediately agrees to fight the Demon Lord to stop the orcs from attacking further. But also, he becomes scared as he worries that they might lose. Because of how worried he is, he believes that if they must win against the orcs, they will have to join forces with the lizard men. Immediately, he insists that Sui goes to speak with the lizard chieftain and hopes he is more sensible than the other lizard they fought. Meanwhile, in the forest, Gabiru has gained his consciousness, and he assumes that the person that defeated him is the leader of the village. This makes him begin to think that he was tricked. His men gullibly believe him, not knowing that their leader is a fool who did not go to do the task he was sent to do. Suddenly, a servant of Gelmd arrives and deceives Gabiru by telling him that his father will not be able to handle the orcs, and unfortunately, Gabiru falls for this treachery and begins to plan to head back to the marshlands. Meanwhile, the orc army continues to draw closer to them, and the chieftain begins to wonder what he can do. At this moment, he surprisingly gets a visitor who happens to be Sui. Sui tells him that he has only come as a messenger to him and demands no hospitality. He tells the chieftain that Rimuru wants an alliance with them to defeat the Orc Lord. Hearing this, one of his servants immediately begins to talk bad about Rimuru, and suddenly tries to use a thread to take Sui's life. Just then, the chieftain stops him and tells him that he accepts the request, seeing that it will be of benefit to both of them. He insists that he goes to see Rimuru, to which Sui agrees but tells him to meet him in 7 days. He as well states that he must not go into battle until they meet. Then he takes his leave. 4 days later, Gabiru returns and begins to persuade his father not to go to war with the orcs, seeing that he was able to mobilize just 7,000 men. The chieftain tells him that while he was away, he met with a powerful force who insists that they focus on defense and not attack the enemy. Hearing this, Gabiru tells him that he is too old to go to war and orders for his father to be arrested. He then tells him that he will release him after he has conquered the Orc Lord. As they drag him away, the chieftain becomes disappointed and wonders what has come over his son. Soon, Gabiru orders his men to attack the orcs only for them to become suppressed after seeing that they are eating other orcs, which he begins to wonder why. Meanwhile, his father is in a prison, not knowing what is happening, and also not fully aware of the power of the Orc Lord. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.